made to avoid the operator's hand getting under the top pipe when using the valve. Okay. This is a view of the lower line where it goes closer to the boiler and down. Note the 45-degree elbows, which reduce the resistance to flow over a 90-degree L. Also note the hook pipe support, which supports the pipe adequately and allows the pipe to be removed with no further dismounting. Never clamp a pipe tight. Now the reason you never clamp a pipe tight to the boiler is your expansion and contraction. So you've got to leave it to where it can expand and contract, and it should be not secured tight to the boiler where it can't move. So remember that. It's a very good point to remember. Okay. The lower of the two horizontal lines in this view is the end of the line discussed in the previous view. This is a Metropolitan injector and is operated solely by the handle shown. The steam line is the vertical pipe at the top. A valve near the boiler, but not showing in this view, allows the steam to be shut off when necessary. Note here it is no shut-off valve for the suction line, only a swinging check valve. This injector did not work well with a foot check valve only. We finally read the installation instructions and found a check valve close to the injector was required. For you fellows curiously, this section is enlarged to 1-inch pipe just below this check. Also note some of the fittings on this suction line I have not recommended. It was piped up one weekend and we used what was available. I promise it will be changed for the 1990 show. Now that Metropolitan injector, not too many of them, I don't think there's one down here in the barn. It's kind of a unique thing. I never did use one. There was, like I was telling you yesterday, there's a lot of different makes of injectors. That is one that I've never had any personal experience with, but I can almost see that a guy could have an injector collection. The most popular injectors, of course, was the US and the Penberthy injector. And I have on my 65 what they call an autopositive injector. And it was made by Penberthy. It's supposed to deliver a little hotter water into the boiler. And you know, I plumbed that injector up one time, and the way I plumbed it was not exactly the recommended. I did not have the injector laying the recommended way or the plumbing diagram by Penberthy, but I plumbed it because it had more direct lines and didn't have a lot of curves and so forth in it, and elbows. I tried to do away with as many as possible. And that injector has always worked perfect. An injector gets hot. When an injector gets hot, it just won't work. And you'll see people putting, pouring water on it, putting a rag on it, different things to keep it to get it cooled down. And one time that autopositive, it never failed, and I thought, well, by golly, I'll just see if I can make it not work. I just turned the steam on, the water shut off, and left the steam on probably for 60 seconds or more, and flipped the water on the way the thing went. And it also seems to have a real good capacity. It seems to pump water pretty fast. So I've always been pretty high on that injector. Like I told you yesterday, I don't care if it's US, a Penberthy, a Deciman, or a Lee, or what type of injector you got. If it works good, that's the one I'd like. An injector that won't work, it can be very disgusting, and you should have one that will work. Now, we probably ought to take a little time, maybe, I don't know if we will today, but in previous classes we've discussed the injector and injector troubles and why they don't work and things to make them work. So we'll get that just a little bit later here. Okay, go ahead.
Teddy, I have a question about this. They don't have any shut-off gate there. How do they blow that thing down?
How they blow what down?
They want to blow through it, clear the water out of it. How do they do it?
Well, imagine just open that one valve does everything. And you're thinking about like the standard injector where you got the steam line. Well, I don't know anything about this Metropolitan injector, but I assume everything just takes place right there at that one deal. And apparently,
double action.
I don't know. I never used one. Never said. I've seen them, but I don't know anything about them. Okay. Well, evidently Lyle likes oddball injectors. Here's an Urbana injector. It is unique because of its swivel body that does away with the right, left, and straight injector bodies. The line in the extreme upper right corner of the picture is the steam supply line. Again, the valve is back near the bar. The next line down is the water feed line and is the same line as the top line in slide 28. The angle globe valve at the upper left is in the feed water suction line. At the bottom of this pipe running down from the globe valve is a three-way valve. This allows water to be pulled from the tanks or from some other source. This line increases one size under the platform. The other vertical pipe to the right is the overflow or slobber tube. Again, that type of injector, I'm not familiar with it, but what Lyle's talking about, different injectors. Here's the injector itself, and you'll have some of them that's got a side delivery and front and so forth, and you get the different types according to your application and how you're plumbing it up. This one here has got a swivel, and you can swivel and turn it whichever way you want to. Okay. Now we're getting to what we was discussing yesterday, the water column. This water column here is on a Reeves engine. Notice it's on the rear boiler head. We discussed the water column in some detail yesterday. This shows the piping of the main line shutoff valve as used on most, here it is. Here is the view of the water glass and water column on a Reeves engine. There is a latitude here to change anything. There is little latitude here to change anything. The valves with the red hand wheels are the shutoff valves for the water column. The lower cock is to blow down the water column. It would be good if this were a larger size. The water glass fitting valves are in plain view, as well as the cock for blowing down the glass. Note all valves turn away from the firing area. So again, here is a water column on a Reeves engine. And we mentioned yesterday the water column is also, if you look at the Garmin engine, you'll see it. Case used the water column, but some of them plumb right directly into the rear head of the boiler, like I think Ivan mentioned the rear-mounted Nichols and Shepherd yesterday. Now, one thing that I noticed running a Reeves engine, or an engine with the water column on the back head, if you kind of got to get used to that, because that engine just tilts slightly one way or the other. You'll either have an awful lot of water in the glass or very little water Again, we want to point out that you should check your boiler, and you should know the boiler that you have, and fill that boiler up to where the water just appears in the bottom of the glass, and then take your rear handhold plate out over on the back head of your boiler and measure how much water you've got over the crown sheet. And if you get a strange engine, or the engine you own, you certainly should know that. In other words, you know where you're at. Okay. The piping of a pop valve, no. This shows the piping of the main steam line shut-off valve as used on most Reeves engines. It is against code to put any valve between the pop valve and the boiler. However, the pop valve is placed in the run of this valve, and only the branched line going to the cylinders can be shut off. I consider a top discharge pop valve such as this one is, coming straight up from the dome, the safest of all around crowds of people. Okay, what Lyle is talking about here, you can see this, and it may be a little confusing to you. This is the type of valve that was used on the Reeves engines. When this valve is open and closed, it only shuts the steam off from going back, here to the dome. It does, or going to the engine, I should say. It does not, this valve does not shut this passageway off going up to the pop valve. And even I've seen one time in up there at Mount Pleasant, the state boiler inspector jumped all over Lyle. He didn't understand the valve, and he thought it shut off the steam going to the pop valve. In other words, on the pop valve, you cannot have any kind of a valve shutting it off between the pop valve and the boiler.
Is that only used on Reeves?
It's the only place I've seen it. And Lyle is talking about there, I guess we don't really have a side delivery pop, which we'll see one here in a minute. But that pop, when it pops, it shoots the steam straight in the air. And a pop valve that has a side delivery, particularly on a smaller size engine that's down closer to the ground, it could shoot out to the side, and unless somebody was, now if you were climbing up there on beside the engine for some reason to work on it, you sure wouldn't want to climb up there where that thing would happen to pop and shoot right out in your face. Okay. Now here, we talked about hazardous plumbing, I have, and of course Lyle in his handout discusses hazardous plumbing, and here's some of it. I think hazardous plumbing can be old plumbing. It can be plumbing that's just sloppily put on a boiler. It can be inadequate valves, poor quality valves, valves that should not be used. And here he has an example of the pop valve here and how it shouldn't be. Now this pop valve here, you can see, is what they call a side delivery pop. Instead of the pop shooting straight up, it's shooting out the side. Now of course, if it's that high on the boiler, it probably wouldn't hurt if it popped, unless you was standing up there and was standing right in front of it when it did pop. It probably wouldn't hurt the general public any. This piping of the pop valve was assembled hand tight to illustrate the ultimate in hazardous piping. The pop valve is a side discharge type, a hazard in itself if not properly piped. When this valve discharges, the reaction forces will tend to drive it to the left. Never underestimate this reaction force. If this valve discharged, it could, and they have been